Thanks for joining me on episode 544 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Winston Clements, motivational speaker and limitation breaker. I challenge you to invest yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the ability to recognize your limitations are an illusion and develop resilience is key. And one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship podcast with my friend Scott Mader.
Where you can actually have people not only look at you and go, man, I love what you do, but they'll actually introduce you to other people and tell them, hey, I love what this person does. If it's a personal relationship, this is where you've actually moved past just trust and into really deeply caring about the success of the other person. Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world. In today's episode about investing in others through stewarding your talent, I talk with you about the VCP principle, why this helps you keep your focus on others while still growing yourself, and how this concept illustrates why growth is a process and not an event. You've heard me talk about developing your talent, and one of the best ways to do that is through books. But if you're like most people today, it's hard to find the time to read. And that's why today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to inspiredstewardship.com/audible to sign up, and you can get a 30-day free trial. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can pick one and listen your way to developing your talents via Audible. That's inspiredstewardship.com/audible to get your free trial and listen to great books the same way you're listening to this podcast. So if you've been around for a while in some sort of business, or maybe online doing business or offline doing business, if you've been around a Business Networking International group, you might have heard people talk about the concept of VCP, visibility, credibility, and profitability. This is a concept that I first saw being promoted by Dr. Ivan Meisner, who's the founder of the B&I groups, but I've also seen it show up in online marketing forums and other places, and I've even seen it attributed to different people. So I'm not 100% sure who first coined this idea, but I do know it's been around for a while. I wanted to talk a little bit about it because even though this is used in a marketing kind of scenario or in a networking kind of scenario, I think the concepts behind it actually apply in a much wider way. So let's first talk about what they are. What are these components of VCP? What are the principles? Well, the basic idea is simply that there's different phases. And I'm going to come back to why we use the word phase there instead of steps. There's different phases of building a relationship with other people. And those phases are the visibility, credibility, and profitability phases. Now, don't misunderstand. Profitability here is not going to be just money, but that's going to be part of it. So let's take them one at a time. Visibility is simply being out there, people being aware that you exist. They're aware that you have a business, or perhaps you provide certain services. They've seen you show up at events or meetings. They've run across your information online, either in a forum or on a Facebook group, or they've seen a post or your blog or a podcast or whatever. It's simply about being out there with some sort of content or some sort of interaction that provides some level of introduction and information. You can become personally acquainted with someone in a non-business relationship where when they see you, they know your name, they know your face, they recognize you, they say hello. This is the visibility phase. This phase is foundational and important because it creates recognition and it creates awareness. But if you just stay in that visibility phase, it's just kind of like having an acquaintance. You're aware of a company, you're aware of a business, you're aware of a person, but you don't really know exactly what's going on with them. You haven't moved past this just visibility phase into the next phase, which is credibility. Credibility is basically, the definition is being worthy of confidence, having other people begin to be able to expect things from you and know what they're going to get. Their expectation is fulfilled. They trust you, in other words. This is when not only do you show up, but you show up on time. You show up regularly. Not only is it, if you say you're going to post a podcast episode every Wednesday, then that podcast episode is out every Wednesday. That's an online environment. Offline, if you have a meeting or if you say, hey, I'm going to call someone back on Tuesday, you actually call them back on Tuesday. Not doing those things kind of creates a negative credibility. You begin to lose credibility. The truth is that when you're thinking about credibility, oftentimes one of the people begin to kind of build that is they'll turn to someone else, someone who's interacted with you in some way, and they say, hey, did they do what they said? Were their products what they said they were? Did they show up? Did they do the work? Did they follow through? Whatever it is that they're concerned about, they ask for feedback from others. So this is why it's important that you have credibility with a large number of people. And then the last phase is profitability. This is when you move into a mature relationship. And it doesn't matter here. It doesn't have to be a business relationship. It can also be a personal relationship. But this is about when it moves to being mutually rewarding. You actually know that you can depend on them. They know that they can depend on you. You understand how you will work together. You understand how you communicate with each other. You actually begin to develop a relationship that goes deeper. It takes time to get to this phase. In a business relationship, this is the phase where you can begin to ask people for referrals and actually get them, where you can actually have people not only look at you and go, man, I love what you do, but they'll actually introduce you to other people and tell them, hey, I love what this person does. If it's a personal relationship, this is where you've actually moved past just trust and into really deeply caring about the success of the other person. You can care about what happens to them. You actually want them to succeed, and you will do things to help them succeed. This is about having goodwill. This is about having a true relationship that goes just deeper than the surface level, even deeper than just basic trust. So those are the phases. And again, I said I'd come back to why I describe this as phases. I've made the mistake before of thinking that this was a formula, like visibility plus credibility equals profitability. If I just show up and I provide, a good relationship and people grow to trust me, then things will come my way. The relationships will naturally deepen, or in a business relationship, I'll actually get referrals from these people. But the truth is that doesn't happen. You have to actively work to deepen the relationship. You have to ask for referrals. You have to explain to people how they can do that. You have to also, in a personal relationship, you actually have to put in effort and work to deepen the relationship. Doesn't matter whether it's personal or business. It takes energy to go to that profitability phase. It's a stage that happens in a relationship, and not every relationship gets there, and that's okay. Not every relationship even gets to the credibility phase. But while you're going through these phases, what ends up happening is you begin to recognize both sides of the equation. What can I do to serve others? That helps build credibility. That helps build visibility. But to move to the profitability stage, you also have to recognize, what do I need to do to grow myself? It helps you recognize that building relationships is a process, not an event. This isn't something that happens overnight. This isn't something that happens immediately. It's not something that happens automatically. If you want to build a relationship, if you're a leader and you want to build relationships with your team that are effective, you have to think about these phases and move through them. If you're in a business relationship and you're trying to gain more referrals, you have to actively think about these phases as you move through them. Most people think, oh, customers, automatically, that's at profitability because I've made a sale, therefore I've made some money. But that's not true. You can make sales in all three of these phases. People will buy from you even at just the visibility phase. They become aware of you, aware of your product, and they make a purchase. The profitability phase is about deepening that relationship to such an extent that not only will they buy from you, they'll introduce you to their friends and family. They'll actually talk to other people about what you do. I found out from a client the other day that this year they sent out some information about me and what I'd been working with them on in their Christmas newsletter to friends and family. That is an incredibly honored position. They're actually probably listening to this right now. And that's when that happens, it's like that. I don't understand. I'm amazed. It's honored because this is something that means that they've trusted what I do. And that is an indicator of the fact that that relationship has deepened to that extent. And when that happens as a coach, that is incredibly honoring. And it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen every time. But if I'm doing my job well, and if I'm continuing to grow myself and continuing to invest and pour into others, then it will happen if I'm deliberate about allowing it to happen and facilitating that process. This is why visibility, credibility, and profitability also includes a factor of time to make it a process, not an event. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of talent, you can go over to inspiredstewardship.com/talent and sign up for our 5-week series on the stewardship of talent. Or if you're in the U.S., you can text 44222 talent tips. That's talent tips to 44222 and get those tips. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.